And welcome back to All Day. It is 12:32 on this Wednesday. Thanks for being with us here. It has been more than a week now since a cyber attack shut down those computer systems in the city of St. Paul. We're some 12 days later now, and some of them are still dark. And there are some people who feel like they are in the dark too. You know, we don't know what kind of damage has been done. We don't know who might have done this. What about people's personal information? The city just kind of in mitigation mode right now. We wanted to just see if we could get some more insight into what's going on since it's been fairly radio silent from the city. So joining me now is Eric Brown. He is Chief Information Officer at IT Audit Labs. This is an information security consulting company helping customers stay secure from things just like this, cyber attacks. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Amy.
So just to set things up for context here, you were at one time in another job here, Chief Information Officer for Ramsey County. You're pretty close to the heartbeat here. You've also worked with other companies who have had situations just like this. So when you heard what happened in St. Paul, what went through your mind?
Sure, and just to set the record straight, I was the Chief Information Security Officer.
Thank you.
At Ramsey County.
Thanks.
And now IT Audit Labs and I work with other entities in the state and local government, so relatively close to the scenario that's unfolding right now.
Yeah, and so you heard about this maybe the way the rest of us did? I don't know. We heard about it like 3 days later, but what went through your mind?
The security team in the Twin Cities is a pretty tight-knit community, so we all talk, and certainly everyone was really pulling for the team at St. Paul and offering help wherever we could. And it is a complex thing. When something like this happens, there is that tendency for the organizations to close up and not be communicative. Some of that is they don't know what's going on themselves as they're trying to really unpack and understand what happened. And then also they may have legal guidance that doesn't allow them to speak freely about what exactly is going on. But I can tell you, Amy, from my perspective, I've been involved firsthand with a few of these, kind of behind the scenes of what's going on. So what would happen in a scenario like this, where you come into an environment and the environment is completely locked out? So imagine that you can't log into your computers, you can't get into the infrastructure that would authenticate your username and password, you're just completely locked out. So you have to go through quite an extensive restoration from backup. So hopefully you've got good backups, and you're restoring your computers, your infrastructure from all of those backups. But imagine walking up to your house and not having the keys to be able to get in. How do you even start to recover? How do you figure out what systems to bring up first? And then once you bring those systems up, you have to make sure that the threat actors didn't have access to those systems. So if they did, they'll just re-compromise them again, and you'll just be back to ground zero. So it is a pretty thoughtful process, and as I understand it, St. Paul brought in the National Guard, and it's not the National Guard with guns. It's the National Guard's cyber team who's coming, boots on the ground, hands on keyboard, helping with that restoration effort.
There's a lot to unpack here. I guess a lot of people wanting to know, do we know who did this? What would a motive be? The city has said they haven't released any information. The FBI is sort of handling the criminal piece of this. But as you look at it, any insight into what a typical motive might be, or in this case, what's to gain here?
Yeah, likely it's financially motivated. So these organizations that are very well run and orchestrated do ransomware as a service, where groups essentially use software that other groups made in order to infiltrate and compromise an organization. And then when that happens, if a ransom is paid, and I'm not saying that a ransom is paid in this scenario, but just talking through how this works and why this happens, it's all financially motivated. Typically, it goes back to some sort of nation-state activity. And by nation-state, think hostile nations to the U.S., North Korea, China, Iran, countries like that. We attribute nation-state activity to, and I'm not saying this was a nation-state attack, but these are the things that fund those nation-state entities. So the ransomware groups will find a way to infiltrate an organization and cause this activity to happen where the companies cannot get into their IT infrastructure, and either they're able to restore from backup, they have to rebuild, or they pay the ransom. And I think looking back over historical times, we see that companies have paid the ransoms to get back access to their infrastructure. There was numerous examples of casinos that this happened to in Vegas a couple of years ago. Baltimore County school system, I think they were offline for the better part of 3 weeks or a month as they navigated their cyber attack. It's the same thing in St. Paul, but right now, as I understand it, the teams are working to build from their backup environment, which is great. As far as I know, there hasn't been interaction from a ransomware perspective. But again, I'm not involved firsthand, and I don't know that.
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting insight, because I think a lot of people, I don't know, a lot of people, I know I was like, why us? Why St. Paul? What do we have that these people could possibly want? Why not in New York City or whatever? This is sort of newish to us. And obviously not something that's new to the cybersecurity world, but it kind of makes me want to ask the question of, well, clearly there's something of value there that they went to the bad actors went to these lengths to try to get. So while the city is saying, well, it's not personal, we don't have any reason to believe anybody's personal information is out there. It might have just been employees, that kind of thing. It just makes me wonder, I guess, as a person who doesn't know anything about this beyond what I'm reading in the same headlines you are, that there's some pretty valuable stuff there, and that makes me very concerned.
I think it's twofold, Amy, and unfortunately, government entities are subject to these cyber attacks. These attempts are happening 24/7, 365. The threat actors are continually trying to attack not only government entities, private entities as well. But from a government entity perspective, you mentioned it, right? They are in care of personally identifiable information, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, ACH information, things that are interesting that could be sold by threat actors or ransomed by threat actors. So we see twofold. On one side, you'll see the ransomware piece, and ransomware is typically an encryption event. What that means is the computers, when they say they're locked out of their infrastructure, it means that there's a program that has gone through and encrypted the data in that environment. And if you don't hold the keys to that encrypted data, you can't access it. It's similar to changing the locks on your house, right? You can't get in if you don't have the keys. So that's one way of holding those keys, essentially ransom, in order to get paid for those keys to be released and then get access back to data. The other is that if data was stolen from the organization, and I'm talking in general now, not just St. Paul, this is the other way these ransomware groups work, is they'll steal data and they'll hold the data ransom. If you pay to have that data deleted, they'll delete that data. If you don't pay, then they'll post that data publicly online in other forums. So it's kind of a twofold way of getting money from an organization.
Okay, thank you for that insight. That helps kind of separate that out a little bit and see what different motives might be. Just yesterday, we talked about now North St. Paul having a breach, and everybody's first reaction is, oh shoot, did they find a soft spot and now they're going to start to go after? Is it the same people? What went through your mind when you heard that there was another one so closely in proximity, I guess, to St. Paul?
It's certainly unfortunate, and I really feel for the teams that are boots on the ground working on this. It's a really stressful environment because you're trying to do work to restore the environment, and then you're consistently getting asked for updates of when are we going to be up, what's going on, how did they get in. So I certainly want to say that the teams are doing a really good job, and they're hard at work going through the recovery and restoration efforts. But what went through my mind, Amy, is yes, is it related? And as I learned a little bit more about what happened with the North St. Paul police department is it sounded like it was business email compromise. So that we refer to that as phishing, and
Yeah.
probably heard of phishing before, and maybe you even get those simulated phishing emails that try to trick you into clicking on a link and then telling you that yes, you either, it was a phishing link or it wasn't, but that the phishing is the number one threat factor. That's how people or threat actors get into an organization, and they can compromise that individual's credentials. They'll phish essentially for those credentials, that username and password, and then if they get that, they'll be able to move throughout the environment.
Gotcha.
So we see two ways, right? Phishing, business email compromise. That sounds like what happened at the police department in North St. Paul, at least what they're publicly saying.
Yeah.
And the other way is a drive-by attack. And this might not be as common as phishing for people, but the concept of a drive-by attack is you visit a compromised website, and typically the attack vector is in the code of a website or in an advertisement on the website. So Google Ad Services serves up a lot of these malicious ads because anybody can pay for an ad, and the malicious actors do the same thing. They'll put malicious code in that ad. When you visit that website and you pull down the ad, it's going to happen behind the scenes. Or you could be socially engineered or tricked into seeing a pop-up that says your browser is out of date, or there's something wrong with your computer. Click this button and it will help you get fixed. So it's a social engineering technique in order to install something on your computer that then the threat actors would gain control of your computer through what we call command and control.
Oh my goodness.
So once that software or that malicious application is on your computer, often silent to you, you don't know it's on there, it's reaching out to the internet, to a server on the internet, to get instructions on what to do. So it'll say, hey, I'm installed, what do you want me to do? And then the kind of master server that's controlled by the threat actor is sending instructions on what to do to that computer. It's going to look around for information. It might siphon off information. It might try to move laterally, as we call it, so move to other servers and computers on that network.
Okay, Eric, I have two more quick questions that I need to get to you here, because I think a lot of people immediately go to, when you're talking about the city of St. Paul, this is kind of a tough one, but it's a question that people have. Was the city of St. Paul adequately prepared? And I guess in all fairness, can anyone really be adequately prepared?
That is a really interesting question. It's a tough question to answer because these threats continue to evolve over time. And the municipalities and the government entities that we entrust with our personal data have to weigh, do they invest in cyber or do they invest in other public-facing needs? And it's a delicate balance. And I think all of our organizations are continuing to evaluate that compromise. How much do we spend in cyber? And unfortunately with cyber, it's not like a forest fire. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. It's happening behind the scenes. And if you're not continually investing, continually bringing on experts, hiring experts, and investing in your tool set, it's like radon gas. It's going to be there, it's going to build up over time, and eventually you're going to have a problem if you don't do the basics, and we call that cyber hygiene. But it's continual and constant investment. And Amy, one of the challenges is, and when you look at what happens or what is happening in the region here, where organizations have not set aside a war chest to invest in the immediate resolution to this problem, it's going to potentially impact other areas of spend. Somehow this has to be mitigated, it has to be paid for. That money's got to come from somewhere, and if it wasn't budgeted for all along, there's going to be other things that are impacted. So my advice is you set that cyber hygiene you continue to invest over time. It's not something where you're going to invest in a new firewall one year and then you're not going to do anything for the next several years. It's a continual investment, and unfortunately, it's not cheap.
Yeah, and I know people would look at you and say, well, of course, you would benefit from that, wouldn't you? I mean, clearly, though, this has happened, and I'm glad you brought up that point, and you kind of answered my second question, which is municipalities, in particular, have a very strict budget, and if we don't know what they had set aside, I suppose it's public record, we could probably go look it up, but this is getting expensive and more expensive. Can you give me a figure, just maybe off the top of your head, of how much more, not just St. Paul, but any entity could pay in retroactively trying to fix something like this, as opposed to kind of just proactively trying to get as set up as they could? Like, how much are we talking?
There's the cost of the mitigation itself. So going back and maybe bringing on additional tools that you didn't have, bringing on staff that you didn't have. And it's in the millions, depending on how bad the impact is. It could be significant, and I think we can look at the other events that have happened in the past with the other breaches that we've all read about over time and have seen the impact. Then there's the cost of not delivering services, and that's more of a hidden cost, but it's going to be significant, and it would be hard for me to estimate exactly how significant, but it's certainly not going to be small.
My goodness. Okay, yeah, this is so much more information to come here as we learn more. But yeah, the impact, even if you don't live in St. Paul, even if this doesn't affect you, is that, like you said, with the budget, that money's got to come from somewhere. And maybe the state will reimburse them for some of this, we don't know, but that money's got to come from somewhere. So there's a ripple effect of this could end up costing all of us a lot. All right, Eric.
Do I leave you with one takeaway? Because that's like, what do we do as individuals, right? We rely on the government for services, but we as individuals need to take personal responsibility for our data as well, as much as we can. I think the thing I want to leave you with is lock your credit. So that if you do anything, lock your credit. If you're, regardless of the St. Paul breach, but just in general, threat actors are going after your personal information, and if you lock your credit, it makes it a lot harder for malicious people to open up credit in your name.
And Eric, if it's okay, would you commit to coming back on here in maybe a week or so and do a segment on that particular thing? It's one thing we just didn't have time to get to today, but really important is what we can do personally with our phones, our laptops, our routers at home, whatever we can do. I'm not speaking your language, so I'm the perfect person, I think, to ask all the questions, because this is not my world. Thank you for sharing your insight. I really appreciate it, and helping us understand what may be going on behind the scenes. And I'm sure they're stressed out. I'm sure this is horrific for everybody. But yeah, it's part of what we're doing now. This is how we're living. So let's get out ahead of it if we can. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate your time.
Have a good one. Thank you.
All right, you too. Take care.